Let's roll, baby. Welcome in a loaded edition of the New York Sports Rush presented by the Bet Rivers Network. John Jastremski, and I'm fired up because this guy's one of the best in the business. Voice of the Jets, college football, NHL. I'll read the resume if you'd like. It's outstanding. He's going to be a very busy man, and unfortunately, the golf game is going to suffer a little bit, Bob Wischusen. But we can't wait to hear the pipes back in action, ready to roll. How's the summer been treating you?
It's over. I can't believe it always goes faster than I'm ready for it to be over. But here we go again. Yeah, it's football season.
Amen to that in some ways, not so much an amen in the other ways. I want to start here. If I had told Bob Wischusen like 3 years ago that in 2026 he'd be getting ready to call Jet games and the week one starter would be Geno Smith, your reaction would be?
I wouldn't have believed it, but at the same point, we've been around the carousel with the Jets. Nothing is that surprising. So yeah, it's he's a different guy. I will say that. Like he's not the same guy that left here. So I've talked to him a little bit. He just seems like to have a different level of maturity about him, which is a good thing.
I was going to say, because you come at this and people who have covered the Jets going back to those days can come at this from a unique perspective where you saw him when he gets drafted out of West Virginia. We don't need to read through the litany, the laundry list, the problems, the issues, the highs, the lows, all that come with it. But like, aside from maturity, Bob, is there one thing that you've noticed maybe on the field? Maybe it's a leadership thing. Maybe it's dealing with people in the media that has been a major contrast from the Geno we last saw, in 2015?
Yeah, and the guy that I last saw, of course, was a first-time starter in the NFL. This is now a guy that's been multiple other stops. He's got some armadillo skin, and you can tell when you talk to him that he's been through it. And I think that just gives him a little bit more, I guess, a sense of being comfortable in his own skin and kind of knowing who he is. When he was, here for the first time, he was just trying to figure it out. They just kind of tossed him in the deep end of the pool.
It's a weird reunion, but at the same time, it makes a ton of sense. Jets needed a stopgap veteran quarterback. They got to find out what they have with these young weapons. Like, I hope it goes better, Bob, than Javier Vasquez part two for the Yankees. I think that's a very, very low bar for Geno Smith. So hopefully he will exceed that. But is that the idea in bringing him back here where it's like, hey, Garrett Wilson's an outstanding wide receiver, but we want to see what we have in A.D. Mitchell. We want to see what we have in these two young tight ends. And let's be real, last year, unless Tyrod Taylor was playing, they had quarterbacks who struggled to basically complete the forward pass. That's one thing I know Geno Smith can do. He can throw the ball, he can spin it, might throw it to the other team, but he's going to be able to get those playmakers the football. Was that, in your opinion, the biggest reason why they went with him as compared to some of these other guys? Just, hey, baseline, you know what you're getting. He's going to be able to throw it.
Yeah, I mean, like he's a professional quarterback. This regime had no contact, no history with him at all. So to them, it's a fresh start. I mean, to the few of us that are still around the Jets, that were around the Jets, a dozen years ago when he was first, coming from college and getting his career started. Okay, well, this is now the reprise. But for this group, it's a whole new coaching staff, a whole new set of teammates, a whole new front office. I mean, the logo's the same, the training facility's in the same place. But for Geno, that's about it. Everything else is new. So he was a logical solution. He was looking for a gig. They needed a guy to come in and play that position. This is all still about next year, what they do next year in the draft and building forward. But if he authors some type, again, of like comeback player of the year type season, maybe their plans get altered a little bit. Not even, I still think they're going to take a quarterback next year, but for maybe how fast they envision that quarterback playing.
Okay. Garrett Wilson obviously has a proven track record. Breece Hall's coming off a terrific season. He has a proven track record. Out of the other playmakers that are trying to emerge here on this team, is there one, Bob, that like in watching these preseason games, heading out to training camp, getting ready for week one against Sal and the Titans, that you have circled saying, I expect big things out of so-and-so?
Yet there would have been two. Both guys are kind of injury stories. Braylon Allen is a different human being. Like he is a man child. And he has looked great so far in training camp and in the preseason games off that knee injury from last year. The other, kind of cut from the same mold, but plays a different position, is Kenyon Sadiq. And they drafted him to be not just, he was kind of a tight end in name only. You could put the title tight end on him, but he would be more of a Debo Samuel type. Like you can run a jet sweep to him. And I don't know that there are three tight ends in the NFL that a team would run a jet sweep to. He can line up in every spot on the field that a wide receiver would line up. He can also play inline tight end. But what is he going to be at the start of the season with basically no training camp under his belt? I don't know. So I'd hope at some point, Braylon Allen stays healthy, Kenyon Sadiq gets healthy, and you see the impact that both of them can have.
Okay, you mentioned impact. They have a new offensive coordinator. He's been around the block. I mean, he's been an NFL head coach before. He's a part of a Super Bowl staff with the Philadelphia Eagles. But Frank Reich was in college. Frank Reich comes back to the pros. For Jet fans that are like unfamiliar with his sort of body of work with Carolina and Indy and on we go, what are the Jets getting with this new offensive coordinator?
I think they're getting imagination, and I think they're getting variety. He has a very deep playbook, and I was really interested, and still am, and will be, to see when they have all of their pieces, what they can do with all of those pieces and the different ways he can kind of imagine using them. Like Kenyon Sadiq with Mason Taylor, with Jeremy Ruckert, you could put all three of those guys on the field at the same time, and you could take Sadiq and Taylor and turn them into wide receivers. You could have a one wide receiver personnel group on the field, but a three wide receiver formation on the field. He could do a lot of different fun things with these guys if they're all healthy. But right now, he's not playing with all of the cards that I think he'd like to be able to use.
Okay, other side of the ball, Bob. David Bailey's the second pick in the draft. And anybody I talk to who's been in Jet camp is like, dude, real deal, plug and play, ready to go. I know he's a rookie, and I know there's always going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But is that the expectation that this guy is the second pick in the draft? Somebody who should be exquisite at getting after the quarterback should be able to come in and hit the ground running?
Yeah, I very, very rarely, if you go back, and not that anybody would track what I've said, but if you go back 25 years with the Jets and track back to the things I've said about players they've drafted and what my expectations are for those players, 99% of the time, it's always they're a rookie, there's a learning curve, deep end of the pool, give them time, let them develop, let them learn the league. Based on what I've seen in training camp from him, the few practices I've been to, the sack he had in Pittsburgh the other night when their starting offensive line was on the field, if you told me he was a 10 sack rookie, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like, I think he's got that capability. Like, he should be a perennial Pro Bowl player if these early indications turn out to be the truth.
Well, and that would be exciting. And listen, the Jet defense this year, Bob, they're looking at these veterans, specifically Demario Davis, who you remember, first stint with the Jets. Rex Ryan was the head coach. Minka Fitzpatrick, who's bounced around Miami, Pittsburgh, back to Miami. And the hope is, hey, they give us instant credibility. Is that the idea now with this defense where it's like, look, you go and add Bailey, you go and get Sweat, who's going to go and stop the run. We go and get some semblance of guys who have been there before, who can show these younger guys, hey, guess what? This is how we go and be professionals. Is that like the blend, the organic mix that Glenn's trying to draw up, coaching this defense, calling the plays for this defense that's going to have them be, dare I say, far more competent?
Yeah, like they've got veteran leadership at all three levels. So no matter what meeting room you're in, there's going to be a guy in there. If you're David Bailey, you are in there with a handful of guys that have been through a lot of this in the NFL. If you are, even one of the young linebackers, you sit next to Demario Davis or, one of these young safeties and you're in a room with Minka Fitzpatrick, like there is supposed to be a trickle down effect, hopefully, to those guys from being around this group. And they've spent more draft capital on the offensive side of the ball than the defensive side of the ball. Bailey being the second pick of the draft, certainly, but they had three picks basically because they traded back into the first round to get Omar Cooper. So they had three first round picks. Even though Bailey was the highest, they took two offensive players with those other 2 first-round picks? Who have they drafted in the first round the previous 2 years? Tackles. Like they have gone out and really, I think, tried to become, a more modern, explosive NFL offense by providing the quarterback some weapons. That means you're trying to patch it together a little bit more on defense. So I'm hoping that, like Minka, Demario Davis, Tavondre Sweat, some of these guys, that they play maybe a little bit even better than the back of their own baseball card this year, because their defense could be decent if that's so.
Were you surprised year one Glenn did not call the plays?
I mean, as a first-time head coach, I'm not really ever surprised that a head coach isn't the play caller. Um, it's funny when Jeff Ulbrich took over for Rex Ryan, or not for Robert Saleh, I should say, and he became, as the defensive coordinator, the interim head coach, but still held the play calling duties. I remember talking to him at one point. He was like, if I ever get a chance to do this again, I'm not calling the plays. It's just too much. Like, there's just too much going on the sideline. Like, let's say there's a bad call on the field against our team. Maybe I should challenge it. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should storm down the sideline and just empty the vault and get my 10 cents worth with the officials. I can't even think that way because my brain has to be on to the next defensive call. And he felt like it was hard to manage the game as a head coach because you were always the one that had to think, what am I calling next? Down and distance next. I got to think situation, get a call into the defense. We have to sub. It's a lot. Like, there's a lot going on. So I think for Aaron Glenn, it was probably beneficial to spend a year just as the head coach, not being the play caller. So now he knows everything that goes into managing the entire game from the sideline as a head coach. Before now, you go back to being the play caller. At least he'll now go into this with eyes wide open about all the things that there are to manage. And of course, Frank Reich is a really nice security blanket as an offensive play caller because he's also been a head coach. So, like, you've got a game management head coach at your side to maybe bounce things off of, where maybe it's not all on you to make every single decision all the time if you're also having to think about what you're calling for the defense.
I asked you about the difference in Geno Smith, which obviously is over a decade. Glenn, is there a big difference that you can feel, Bob, just dealing with him, being around him year one, a year two? Is that something you can't really figure out until the season gets going?
I mean, he apologized to the media, right? Like, he seems like he's lightening up a little bit in terms of his press conference orneriness, but I don't know. On the field, he seems like the same person. I mean, from what I've observed from a distance when he coaches the team, I don't see a lot of difference from year one to year two.
And he was very pleasant, right? Like, when he was on a team playing for Bill Parcells and playing for Herman Edwards, he was always one of the guys that felt like the media guys were going to, right? Is that why it was a little bit of a surprise that he kind of came in and was like, hey, I'm going to be a hard ass with the media right out of the gate?
Yeah, I remember him being pretty cooperative as a player, and that's how long I've been around the Jets. This is year 31, I think, of being at least in the locker room. I mean, 1996, I think, was the first year that FAN sent me out there to cover them. It was the second year of Rich Kotite, and Aaron Glenn was on the team. So I had him for a few years as a guy you could talk to in the locker room as a player. There were certain guys sometimes that hid from the media, but no, I don't remember him being one of those guys. I remember him, being pretty stand up.
Okay, you're calling the games. We want to have some games that are fun, that are watchable. I know you're dying for it in the absolute worst way.
Yeah.
What's progress for this team? Like, when you're doing a game Sunday after Sunday, what, in your opinion, would be, I don't even want to say success, but progress, where you feel like the team is moving in the right direction? I know our eyes are going to tell us, like, hey, the Jets are in a lot more games. It's not going to be unwatchable product we saw over the final 5 weeks of the year. But for somebody who's calling the games, you give me 30 plus years of being around the team. What is watchability progress for the 2026 Jets?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think it is an eye test thing. I don't want to put a win total on it. If they win 7, it's a success. If they win 5, it's a dreadful failure. If they win 8, it's through the moon. I mean, obviously, it would be really nice if they won enough games so that at least you could get to Thanksgiving or so and just be in the mathematical conversation. right? Have a reason to scoreboard watch a few other games. You're in the wild card race. When they put that graphic up
In
on
the hunt,
TV
Bob. You want to
and
be
it's
in the
every,
hunt.
and
Yeah.
like your helmet wants to be in the hunt. You don't want to be the teams that are, not even part of the graphic. So that would be nice. I have heard some people say the best thing that could happen to the Jets this year would be to lose every game because they've got 3 first-round picks next year, and they're going to have the first pick in the draft. And I think the very opposite because they have 3 first-round picks next year. There's no reason to tank. There's no reason to root for them to lose. I do think they will draft a quarterback next season. But because you have 3 first-round picks, regardless of where your picks land, you might either have a high enough pick to get the guy you want if you have a 3 or 4 win season, which would be a bad story, but at least you'd be towards the top of the draft. Maybe that would work. Or if you have a good season and you win 7, 8, 9 games and you're in the playoff conversation at least into December and there's real progress, but then you could use those picks as ammunition to go up still and get the guy that you want because you've got 3 of them. So to me, it's a win-win. There's no reason to root for them to lose. I know there have been times in years past where, yes, you could see they were a bad team and they hurt themselves a little bit by winning a game or two towards the end of the season. Last year, they tanked and they ended up with the 2nd pick in a 1-quarterback draft. Well, like, what are you going to do, right? Dante Moore went back to college, and they didn't get Mendoza. Now you get David Bailey. But this year, there should be anywhere from on the low end 3 or 4 to on the high end maybe 6 or 7 quarterbacks in this draft that people think might be first round worthy. And there always seems to be a guy or two that emerges that's not even on the radar.
Happens
So
all
I
the
would
time.
think with
Bob,
3,
nobody had Mendoza as the number 1 pick last year, or even the Burrow
no,
year. As great as Burrow ended up being, he played on an all-time team. Going into that year, it was Tua Herbert.
No, I mean, what's funny is if you go back and look at the pre-draft prognostication lists for quarterbacks last year, Cade Klubnik was on most of those lists. As this guy goes out of Clemson, throws 35 more touchdowns, and they're in the college football playoff, someone's going to take Cade Klubnik in like the top 10. And the Jets got him in the 3rd or 4th round. So he's on their team now. So, I mean, I think maybe at some point we may have a chance to see him play. History certainly suggests with injuries and also with how seasons have gone that he'll get a chance to play at some point this year. But to me, with 3 first-round picks, you have the ammunition to go get the guy you want, even if you win more games than people are expecting. And the other thing, too, they have drafted a lot of players over the last 3 or 4 years in the first round, second round of the draft that they have high hopes for. What does it say about those guys if they went out and were like a 1-win team this season? But you want to see progress at places other than quarterback. So if David Bailey is a 10-sack player, if Omar Cooper does become, a really dangerous slot receiver, if these young running backs continue to progress, if Kenyon Sadiq turns into this all-around weapon we're hoping that he's going to be, then they should be a 5, 6, 7 win team. That would show progress, but also because that means you've got other good football players on your team, and you want to believe that as well. So, I think it's an eye test thing. I think it's more than anything, how competitive are they going to be from week to week rather than sticking a win total on it.
All right, Bob, final one. You're going to be doing a bunch of college football games, and we know how schedules could work out. You don't know who you're doing. You do week 1, but then it gets all sorts of crazy with each passing week.
Yep.
But it's a loaded quarterback class. Maybe you've called one of these guys' games. Maybe you haven't. If Bob Wischusen can go and call one of these young stud quarterbacks' games coming up in 2026, is there a guy that you'd like to see in person?
Well, I mean, I would probably only selfishly talk about it from guys that I saw last year in person that now are in this conversation this year. And to me, it is Dante Moore at Oregon. He really has that, not just that physical ability, like off the bus, throwing it anywhere, can throw any route anywhere in the building. He has that kind of inequality of a quarterback where there's just this overall sense when he's on the field. You can see how he interacts with teammates. Where he's like, guys, it doesn't matter how bad things go. Don't worry about it. I got this. And to me, there's kind of that intangible that you can see in just the body language of a quarterback that he's comfortable in his own skin playing the hardest position arguably to play in sports. So they didn't get him last year because he decided to go back to Oregon. Maybe this year he'll be their guy. I don't know, but he really is, I think, worthy of being right at the top of the draft in that conversation with anyone.
Bob will be watching on Saturdays. We'll be listening on Sundays. Let the games begin. Thanks for a few minutes, man. We really appreciate you.
Glad to help.
Bob Wischusen, voice of the New York Jets. That's going to do it for us. New York Sports Rush, presented by the Bet Rivers Network. We'll be back Wednesday. Carver and Steele are going to join you. Be good, everybody.